When I agreed to help you, Rain, this wasn't what I had in mind.
Rain had called him a few weeks ago, saying he was ready to call in his favor. Killian was more than willing to let him cash in his chips, too. He owed Rain for the unfortunate nonsense of the year before, a case involving a fellow using a ghost as a power source, and Rain had been more involved than Killian had strictly wanted him to be. He had been hurt, taken hostage by people who thought Killian was working for the entity that he was hunting, and Killian had found himself in the end in Rain's debt quite a bit. Rain had found his current boyfriend during that case, so Killian supposed it wasn't a total loss for him, though. Now they were sitting in the last place Killian would have expected the favor to take them, at the tables in Las Vegas playing poker. Rain had explained the plan as they got ready, the man primping before hitting the casino floor. "You'll ride along with me. Look at the cards my fellow gamblers have, and let me know how to place my bets accordingly. I'd like to come back with some money, so the only strangers I have to invite into my house stop in the living room." Killian didn't want to think too hard about the implications of that. He knew that Rain used the abilities the agency gave him to tell people's fortunes, but there were other aspects of Rain's life that Killian didn't like to pry into. Rain was a good friend, someone Killian genuinely liked, but he was definitely a colorful character when it came to the day-to-day operation of his business interests.
This is a little different than my usual gig, Rain. I'm not sure how comfortable
Oh, no getting cold feet now. You said I could have one no-questions-asked favor, and this is it. If you want to welch, I guess you could. If you do that, though, don't bother coming to me for help again. Killian started to tell him that wasn't necessary, but Rain cut him off midway. And if that's the case, then you could tell the agency that they can tender my resignation, too. Killian wanted to get upset, both at the insinuation that he would welch on a bed and how ridiculously over the top Rain was being. But the longer he watched the man get ready, the more he felt he understood his reaction. Killian had taken a lot from Rain over the years. His time, his dignity, sometimes even his pretense of safety. Rain had been beaten up the year before because of him, and he'd taken a while to recover afterwards. Rain valued his appearance, but Killian knew that he valued his connection with the detective as well. The thought that Killian would make a deal and then not follow through was enough to break his trust in the organization he served, just as much as his friend.
I gave you my word, Rain. I'm not about to deny my debt this late in the game.
He had been appeased, but as the preening Rain finally headed out to try his luck, Killian wondered if he might have bit off more than he could chew. This wasn't technically a violation of the rules, but it made Killian feel a little off. The agency didn't have any scruples about fleecing the living, but they did take umbrage to the living using the dead for their own gains. To Killian, this was him repaying a debt, but the agency might not see it that way if Rain was caught. Killian was conflicted as they headed out onto the noisy casino floor of the Majestic, but the sudden immersion into the miasma of light and sound took his mind off of it. He was back amongst the dead again, and the number of oxygen tanks and open flames was a little alarming. Watching the oldsters throw their social security payments down the throats of the one-armed bandit was a little sickening, and Killian wondered how many of them would be visiting him in the coming years. Most of them likely wouldn't have the spirit to linger, but more than a few of them would make for some formidable spooks. As they moved amongst the glitz and glamour, Rain's eyes looked for the best place to inevitably waste his money. "See anything promising?" he whispered.
Promising. Sorry, Rain. There's a lot of neon here, but none of it pointing to an easy score.
"Fat lot of help you are," Rain grumbled, taking another look before finally settling on a free table on the outskirts. It wasn't full by any means, and the table company left a lot to be desired. The man on their right had more cologne on than he needed, and could have saved himself the effort of putting all that greasy chest hair on display from the neck of his silk shirt. The man on the left seemed to be pulling oxygen from his tank as fervently as he pulled the smoke off his stogie. He was garbed in Walmart splendor, his cargo shorts complemented by the fake leather of his chair cushions. The third was a kid, probably just old enough to gamble, and the waitress was giving him a wide berth as she rounded with the booze tray. She, like Killian, likely doubted the authenticity of whatever ID had gotten him through the door. The dealer smiled at Rain and dealed him in as he set his chips down, and they began. "All right, Killian, let me know what I'm up against," he whispered as he checked his cards. Killian sighed, leaving Rain as he moved around the table. Outside of his veyance, the world looked a little different. Killian had never been to Vegas in his life, and his mind had no brush to paint the landscape with, give it dimension. As such, the casino became monochrome, and Killian could see Rain's tablemates for who they truly were. The old man was like some grotesque baby, a bottle in each hand, while the hairy man beside him was a wolf in cheap clothing. The kid was more normal, but he looked like a toddler sitting at the adults' table for Christmas dinner. None of this was terribly new to Killian, however, and he went about his business. The wolf man with the loud cologne had 3 8s. The old baby man was sitting on an incomplete straight, though he could easily change that if the cards went his way. And the kid had nothing, except a pair of 5s, and he was likely pretending those weren't trash. Killian returned to his veyance, settling back into the man as he conveyed his findings.
Old man could have something, but he'd have to draw for it. The kid doesn't have anything, but Harry Hal there has 3 of a kind.
Rain looked at his hand, seeing a pair of queens. Well, that's a start. Let's see what we can do. Over the next few minutes, Rain added another queen to his pair, and the old man folded when he couldn't complete his straight. The guy with the 3 of a kind hung in there, and the kid tried to play it cool as he continued to sit on nothing. Chest hair raised, Rain raised, the kid folded, and then Rain called and scooped up $200. The cards came out again, and for the next several hours, the pair played. The longer they went on, the less Killian suspected Rain really needed his help. Rain turned out to be a skilled card player, and several times when Killian suggested he fold, he played on and won. Rain was smart, cagey when he needed to be, and gave nothing away to his opponents. Killian found his respect growing for the young man, the more they interacted outside of work, and as midnight passed, Rain had accumulated quite a lot of money. They didn't win every hand, but Killian was quite proud of their pot and was no longer divided on the part that he was playing in all of this. The kid finally sighed in disgust as he tossed his cards down, leaving the table with nothing but injured pride, and as the next hand came out, a new fella stepped up to the table. "Mind if I sit in, gentlemen?" Killian looked up when he heard the voice and felt a shiver run through him as he took in the man with his bony fingers as he took the kid's empty seat. The man was tall, what others would have called rail thin, and had an eldritch-looking hat on that looked like it'd be right at home on a cattle drive. His suit was coal black, the buttons gold, and when he smiled, Killian saw a single gold tooth winking amongst the other ivory contenders. The man looked like an oil baron or some kind of rail magnate in a Western novel, and he extended an energy that Killian didn't like.
Rain, let's pack it in. You've won a decent pot here. Almost $6,000 in a few hours. Let's head back to the complimentary buffet and let this guy be.
Rain looked at the guy, clearly catching some of what Killian was talking about, and reached for his chips. "It's getting a little late for me, fellas. I think I'll turn in for the night." The loud click of the new man's chips turned Rain back towards his latest opponent, and the gold-toothed smile made a reappearance. "Leaving so soon? I'd hoped to test your skill a little, but if you're content with your measly winnings, then I guess it's time for you to head to bed." Rain was no fool, but Killian sensed that he was a little greedy. He looked at the pile of chips the way starving dogs looked at meat scraps. "Well, maybe I can stay just a little while longer." As the man laughed, Killian thought again about how he seemed odd. He wondered if maybe he was someone from his side of the tracks. But as the cards came down, he saw Rain had little to worry about. He was holding a pair. He could turn that into a flush or 3 of a kind with relative ease. Rain had come to the same conclusion, and he told Killian to hang tight as he went to work. The two seemed to be the only ones playing, Harry, Hal, and Gramps just there to fold and spectate. Killian saw the two as fencers more than card players, and Rain gave as good as he got. Both players went up and down, parry and thrust, and finally came back to something like even footing. An hour had passed, but to Killian it felt like days had gone by as they sat and faced the grinning man. "I tip my hat to you, sir. You are quite a card player. Let's make this interesting, shall we?" He slid all his chips in, never breaking eye contact with Rain. "All in. Will you do the same? One hand to win or lose?" Killian could feel the nervous energy inside his friend, and when he slid the chips over, he knew what was coming next. "I need to know what he's got, Killian. This is huge. I could live like a fat rat for a long while off that kind of scratch." Killian sighed as he slid out of Rain to go check on his opponent's cards, wanting to know how much trouble they were in. As Killian left his Vance, however, he realized they were in more trouble than they knew. Killian saw the newcomer in a way that he hadn't seen the others. He wasn't monochrome, and the sudden presence of color in this place made Killian's eyes water. He was a grinning skeleton, his eyes blazing red bonfires in each eye socket, and his gold tooth twinkled as he saw Killian slide out of the man across from him. The air around him seemed to churn with a strange black and purple miasma, and Killian thought he could see lightning amongst those clouds as he watched the creature. "I thought I saw a spook," the thing said, chuckling dryly. Killian paled as he realized it was talking to him, that it could see him as well as he could see it. "No more cheating for you." It extended its hand, and Killian felt himself drawn towards it. The call of that bony hand was undeniable, and the more Killian tried to focus his will, the slipperier it became. He was leaving Rain behind, moving towards that gaseous mound of color and lightning. The closer he got, the more he realized those sparks weren't lightning at all, but trapped spirits as they collided with the boundaries of their prison. Killian drew his weapon, but the spirit just laughed at him. "Don't waste your time, little shade. I was old when you drew your first breath, and I will still walk this blasted land when you finally pass on." Killian fired anyway, but his usual concussive blasts were muted somehow as they passed within the stranger's sphere of influence. He squeezed off 3 shots, quick fast, but each was less spectacular than the last. They slid into the miasma and were lost amongst its folds, never falling back out the other side. Killian closed his eyes as he came in close, certain his limited existence was about to come to an end. "Stop!" came a commanding voice that brought Killian up short. He turned his head, his form wafting a little away from the bank of smog, and saw Rain sitting forward. His form looked oddly colorful here in this space. He was dressed in a series of multicolored scarves, looking for all the world like Joseph in the Technicolor Dream Cloak, and as he looked at the creature, he steepled his fingers in a decidedly wizardly fashion. The two stared at each other appraisingly, Killian seeming to hang in the balance, and he felt the ebb and flow of energy between them. It appeared that Rain might be a little more substantial than Killian had given him credit for. "Son, this spirit and you are attempting to cheat in my territory. If you do not wish to be drawn in with him for your crimes, I would suggest you step aside." To his credit, Rain never flinched. "This spirit is in my debt, and you are attempting to bid him while he is fulfilling his promise to me. Under the laws of incorporitatis, that makes you as much a thief as I am a cheater." The stranger looked at him, his fiery eyes twinkling, and flashed his bony grin again. "So, how shall we settle this, speaker?" "As you said, a single hand. Winner take all. If you win, we leave with our winnings and bother you no longer. If you win, then you get my friend and I in the bargain." Killian started to scream at him not to make such a deal. He was beginning to understand what this creature was more and more with every word it spoke. But when he opened his mouth, nothing came out. His vocal cords were frozen, his words stolen, and he was a silent spectator in the coming duel. As the color returned and the two once again took their places in the land of the living, Killian was held in limbo to watch it all unfold. It was maddening to watch your fate decided by something as simple as the turn of a card. The game went on, but Rain and the well-dressed stranger were the only two playing. The man with too much chest hair folded right away, and the old man seemed to have dozed off sometime in between hands. The two combatants handed in their cards, drawing new ones, handing them in again. They anteed, the money no real objective to them. They were all in, and when Rain called, the stranger dropped his opening salvo. He had a full house, kings high. Killian looked at Rain, and as the man turned his eyes towards the grinning dead man, he was glad to see that he didn't look scared in the least. 4 of a kind, he said, dropping a line of 2s with a 9 in the wings. There was silence for a moment. Then the stranger laughed hard and deep. It was not an altogether merry sound. Well played, young man. I believe I will find my sport elsewhere. I wish you safe travels, though I would recommend you start that journey sooner rather than later. Rain nodded, and as Killian slid back into his friend, he heard a harsh voice in his own ear. Stay out of my town, spook. I won't be so polite a second time. Rain scooped up his chips, excusing himself to the others as he took his winnings to the cash window. As he waited for his payout, Killian heard him sigh deeply as the cool ran out of him. I've never been so scared in my entire life. What the hell was that? Killian thought about how best to answer as he took a deep breath of his own. Rain had some idea of the perils they'd been in, but Killian doubted that he knew how close they had both come to oblivion. They may not have beaten the devil, but they had kicked him in the shins and run away before he could give chase.
There's a legend in the Old West about wandering spirits who make deals with mortals for their souls. Usually this takes the form of a drinking contest, but there can also be games of chance or skill. He's a spirit of competition, a wandering ghoul with many names. And who better to have taken control of Las Vegas, I suppose. Very few mortals have bested him, so consider yourself very lucky.
As the woman came back with his winnings, the money secured in an envelope, Rain thanked her and headed back to his room. How much do you think it'll cost to push my ticket to an earlier flight? Rain asked, looking over the nearly 15 grand in hundreds he had inside a brown paper rectangle. Killian looked behind them and saw the well-dressed man standing in the middle of the casino floor, his grin noticeably absent as he watched them leave.
Less than your life. That's for certain.
You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributor. Thanks to Janet and Lady Vengeance for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you think you might like to support the show in a more monetary fashion, come on down to Patreon. I have many tiers. I'm sure you'll find one that suits you best. I always recommend the Ghostly Reader tier, since you get a signed book anytime I write one on your doorstep. But I have many tiers, and again, I'm sure you'll find one to suit you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.